The United States and Iran have one of the most complicated and controversial relationships in the entire world. The United States is the world's preeminent superpower with a population of over 320 million, while Iran is a major regional power in its own right with a population exceeding 80 million. Together, these two countries represent roughly 4% and 1% of the human population on Earth. Yet, for the past 41 years, they have had absolutely zero diplomatic relations and have come to the very brink of all-out war on more than one occasion. At the beginning of 2020, war between the two sides seemed almost inevitable. The United States assassinated a highly ranked Iranian major general via a drone strike, and Iran retaliated by launching artillery and missile strikes against American military bases across Iraq. Had a war broken out right then and there, it had the terrifying potential to become the biggest global conflict since the Second World War. Thankfully, that dark fate was avoided. But to understand how it got so close and why it could easily happen again during a future crisis, you have to understand the entire history of the conflict between America and Iran. Our story begins way before the start of World War II. At the beginning of the 20th century, oil was discovered for the very first time in the deserts of Iran by the British. As more discoveries were made, it was revealed that Iran actually contained the fourth largest proven oil reserves on the planet. The country was an undiscovered energy superpower. The only problem for the British was that this oil was located in Iran, and Iran wasn't part of Britain's vast colonial empire. Not letting that detail stop them, Britain negotiated a deal with Iran to share the massive profits that would come from extracting this oil. They created the jointly owned Anglo-Iranian Oil Company, but it wasn't exactly a fair split. Iran, the country where the oil was actually located, was only entitled to 16% of the profits. The other 84% went directly into British pockets. By the start of World War II, this company had grown to control all of Iran's oil and became the largest company in the entire British Empire. But this massively valuable asset soon came under threat. Discontent over the company's unfair terms was growing inside Iran. At the same time, in 1941, Nazi Germany invaded the Soviet Union, opening up the largest military front line in human history. Iran sat right at the Soviet Union's vulnerable southern flank, and their intentions were highly suspect to both the British and the Soviets. Despite declaring neutrality, Iran's ruling monarch, the Shah, was widely viewed by the Allies as being too friendly with the Nazis. If Iran collaborated with the Axis powers, it could have opened a devastating southern front against the Soviets. It could have jeopardized the Soviet oil fields in the Caucasus, and, crucially, it could have placed Britain's largest oil company directly into the hands of the Nazis. To prevent this, and to secure Iran as a supply corridor to the Soviet Union, British and Soviet forces invaded neutral Iran. Vastly outnumbered, Iran surrendered in just a week. The old Shah was overthrown and replaced by his 21-year-old son, Mohammad Reza Pahlavi, who the Allies felt would be far easier to control. Iran was occupied for the rest of the war, hosting over 30,000 American troops who helped transport vital supplies. After the war, the Allies left, but the unfair British oil monopoly remained. By the early 1950s, Britain was still taking the lion's share of the profits. Iranian oil workers lived in terrible conditions, and the British refused to let the Iranian government audit the company's financial records. In 1951, Iran's democratically elected Prime Minister, Mohammad Mossadegh, with unanimous approval from Parliament, finally nationalized Iran's oil. Britain responded by immediately embargoing all Iranian oil exports. 2 years later, in 1953, Britain's MI6 and America's CIA orchestrated a military coup to overthrow Mossadegh's government. Around 300 Iranians were killed in the chaos. Mossadegh was placed under house arrest for the rest of his life, and the Shah was elevated to the position of an absolute dictator, his power firmly installed and guaranteed by Western powers. To his people, the Shah was now seen as a Western puppet. During the Cold War, Iran's oil and strategic location made the Shah a highly valuable ally to the United States and Israel. However, the Shah's brutal internal policies and cozy relationship with the West alienated his own people. He ran a vast network of secret police, arresting and torturing thousands of political opponents. He exiled prominent figures, including Ayatollah Khomeini. His policies alienated leftists, the working class, and hardcore conservative Shiite Muslims. By the late 1970s, this unrest exploded into a full-scale revolution. The tipping point included a tragic incident where a movie theater in Abadan was burned down, killing 420 people, an act many blamed on the Shah's secret police. The following month, the Shah's army opened fire on protesters in Tehran, killing hundreds. Over 5 million Iranians took to the streets demanding his abdication. In early 1979, the Shah fled into exile. The new Islamic government invited Ayatollah Khomeini back after 15 years in exile to become the supreme leader. The modern Islamic Republic of Iran was born, a strict theocracy staunchly opposed to the US and Israel. The revolution was a massive shock to the United States. Overnight, Iran flipped from an essential Middle Eastern ally to its greatest enemy. When the US admitted the exiled Shah for cancer treatment, Iran demanded his extradition to face trial for his crimes. The US refused, fueled by paranoia that the CIA was plotting another coup from their embassy in Tehran. Thousands of radical Iranian students stormed the US embassy in November 1979, taking 52 American diplomats hostage. President Jimmy Carter tried diplomacy, but when that failed, he authorized a military rescue mission in April 1980, known as Operation Eagle Claw. It was a disaster. A helicopter crashed into a transport plane before ever reaching the hostages, killing 8 American soldiers. The US immediately severed all diplomatic relations with Iran, a freeze that remains to this day. The hostages were finally released after 444 days, right as a new crisis was beginning. In September 1980, Saddam Hussein's Iraq launched a massive invasion into Iran, hoping to capitalize on the post-revolution chaos and become the dominant power in the Persian Gulf. Iraq expected a quick victory, but the conflict turned into a grueling 8-year bloodbath reminiscent of World War I. The US heavily supplied Saddam Hussein's forces to further destabilize Iran. Over 400,000 Iranians died in the conflict, partly due to Iraq's use of chemical weapons. During this time, Iranian-backed proxy groups like Hezbollah carried out devastating attacks against the US, including the 1983 bombings of the US Embassy and military barracks in Lebanon, killing hundreds of Americans. In 1988, an American naval frigate struck an Iranian mine in the Persian Gulf. The US retaliated with Operation Praying Mantis, sinking half of Iran's operational naval fleet in the largest US naval surface action since World War II. Just months later, an American cruiser mistakenly shot down Iran Air Flight 655, a civilian airliner, killing all 290 innocent people on board. Both sides now felt the other was guilty of unforgivable atrocities. Following the 9/11 attacks, President George W. Bush labeled Iran part of an axis of evil. Soon after, the US invaded neighboring Iraq. Seeing this, Iran hastily accelerated its nuclear research program. The US made it clear that a nuclear-armed Iran would never be tolerated, relying on heavy sanctions to cripple their economy. In 2015, the Obama administration successfully negotiated the Iran nuclear deal, lifting sanctions in exchange for Iran halting its nuclear weapons program. However, in 2018, President Donald Trump officially withdrew the US from the deal and reinstated crushing sanctions. Tensions immediately skyrocketed. By 2019, merchant ships in the Persian Gulf were being attacked. Iran shot down a US surveillance drone, and both sides began seizing oil tankers. By the end of the year, Iranian-backed militias in Iraq were firing rockets at US bases and violently protesting outside the US Embassy in Baghdad. The ultimate boiling point hit on January 3, 2020. President Trump authorized a drone strike at the Baghdad airport that assassinated Qasem Soleimani, an Iranian major general and arguably the second most powerful man in Iran. It was the highest profile U.S. assassination of a foreign military leader since World War II. 5 days later, Iran retaliated by launching a barrage of ballistic missiles at U.S. military bases in Iraq. The world held its breath, expecting full-scale war. Miraculously, no U.S. personnel were killed, allowing both nations a chance to de-escalate without losing face. But tragedy still struck. On high alert for a U.S. counterattack, an Iranian anti-air battery misidentified a civilian plane taking off from Tehran as an incoming U.S. cruise missile. They shot down Ukraine International Airlines Flight 752, killing all 176 innocent people on board. Iran's initial attempt to cover it up led to massive domestic protests. The history between the United States and Iran is defined by decades of betrayal, proxy wars, and immense bloodshed. While an all-out global war was narrowly avoided in 2020, the peace between these two nations remains incredibly fragile. What are your thoughts on this long-standing geopolitical conflict? Let me know in the comments below. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more deep dives into the geopolitics that shape our world. Thanks for watching.